Hey guys, welcome back to the video. In this video, guys, my spoiler-free review for Violent Night. I was recently at New York Comic Con and they gave us a super early screener of Violent Night, which comes out in theaters across the United States on December 2nd. And before we get into it, if you guys enjoy my movie and TV show reviews, reactions, and breakdowns, make sure to subscribe and notifications on so you don't miss any time of new video or go live. But don't waste any more time, let's get into it. Violent Night is about a team of mercenaries that break into a wealthy family's compound on Christmas Eve, holding everyone hostage. Only one person can save them, and it's the one and only Santa Claus. So again, Violent Night comes out on December 2nd of this year, and I was super excited to watch it early at New York Comic Con. We also got to see David Harbour in person as he did introduce the movie.
I gotta screen this movie for my nerd friends in New York!
This movie has had a lot of buzz around it, not only because it's David Harbour playing Santa Claus, but also it's being produced by David Leitch. If you guys didn't know, David Leitch has worked on Bullet Train, Deadpool 2, Atomic Blonde, Fast and Furious, Hobbs and Shaw, John Wick, Nobody, John Wick 2, John Wick 3, Matrix Reloaded, 300, and many other action movies that you probably love. Speaking of action, we're gonna start off by talking about the absolutely insane violence in this movie. It is action-packed, a hard R movie, and the best way to describe the action here is John Wick meets Home Alone, because you have the super unique traps and all the super creative things, but you also have just those insane fights that movies like John Wick have. The action is so great overall. There's one huge action sequence near the end of the movie where the cinematography, the violence, just the choreography, everything fits so well into one another. It's one of my favorite action scenes of this year so far. And honestly, I'm a little bit biased when it comes to this movie because not only did we get to watch it early, but we also got to see David Harbour. But on top of that, I'm a massive sucker for very violent movies and Christmas movies. So when you combine those two things, I will absolutely fall in love, and that's exactly what this movie did to me. Also, the blood isn't like super over the top. I feel like the kills themselves are over the top like John Wick, but the blood is super realistic, and I think it actually makes sense why it's so gory. There's some movies where it's just way too over the top, and it honestly just makes you feel queasy because of just the amount of blood. But here, it's a good amount of blood, but it's also fairly realistic. But then there are some insane kills, some specifically that have to do with the chimney, lawnmowers, and honestly, I don't think I can say the other stuff. There is a lot of gory stuff in this movie, and honestly, it's worth the watch just for the kills. But the humor itself is also very, very great. In my opinion, it's the funniest movie of 2022 so far. Might watch another one that's a little more funny, but I don't think anything's gonna take the cake for this one. It's also super inappropriate. It's not just rated R for violence, but the jokes are also hilariously inappropriate. And the comedic timing by all the characters, but more specifically David Harbour, is just absolute perfection in my opinion. Speaking of David Harbour, the acting in this movie is good overall. This movie stars David Harbour, Alex Hassell, John Leguizamo, as well as a bunch of other side characters. But for our main three actors, the acting is good. They are all pretty good actors, but the rest of it, I feel like they all just rely on the comedic timing and just the comedy of their characters, which does work. They are all hilarious. Not one character in this movie is unfunny, and they all play their parts very well. But as a whole, again, it's a very basic story, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. But it's a very basic story with characters that really don't need that much depth, and so it's not that big of a deal that all of their performances weren't top notch. But I will say David Harbour as Santa Claus is absolutely awesome, and at the end of the day, I do hope we get a sequel for this movie, though I don't know if it'll go down as a classic Christmas movie, because for that to happen, it has to age well. Movies like Elf and Home Alone, they've aged over time, and the reason for that is because you can turn them on every Christmas. You can have a cup of hot cocoa and gather around the fireplace, watch Elf, watch Home Alone, all these iconic Christmas movies. But this one, you cannot watch with your family. At least if there's anyone under like 16 watching this movie, because it is so violent, which I do believe is just gonna make this movie into a cult classic rather than just a Christmas classic, because again, I definitely just think it's way too violent for it to be just a family movie. I do believe though, within it being a cult classic, I think a lot of people will have a tradition of turning this one on during the Christmas time, especially if it's just like, if you're a lot older and you're not necessarily watching movies during Christmas time with your family. If it's a bunch of college kids, a bunch of adults, they'll definitely be turning this one on before they turn on Home Alone or Elf. And the violence also makes this one a lot more engaging rather than Elf or Home Alone, where I feel like in Home Alone you have it a little bit more because of these traps, but Elf is more just a random story, like a very generic Christmas story that's very fun, happy. And this one is fun and happy, but in different ways. There are definitely corny elements like Elf, where you have to just believe in Santa for stuff to happen. But again, this one takes it up a notch because of the violence, because of how inappropriate it actually is. Like I said before, in general, this is a very average story. There's not much in terms of substance here, but I also wouldn't say it's a turn your brain off and watch type of thing, just because of the action itself. The choreography is so engaging. Movies that I could compare it to in terms of action correlating with the story itself is something like Extraction. The story isn't really that phenomenal, but the action really is, and that's what really keeps you engaged. That makes it where you can't just turn your brain off and just randomly watch this movie. I feel like you have to be really invested into these characters to actually care about the story itself. And the story is a very basic plot point. Like I said before, it's just mercenaries holding a rich family hostage and Santa has to save them. The way that all of that happens is very, very cool. There's not many huge twists and turns. There's like one or two, but again, they're not really that impactful, to be honest. The themes in this movie in general are not that deep, but again, a Christmas classic movie doesn't really need that. All you have to have a theme of is like believing in Santa, believing in this, and that movie definitely does that, especially towards the end. You have those, you have to believe in Santa, you have to believe in Santa, and they set those things from the very beginning of the movie, so it's not something random, and it feels like it's something consistently happening throughout the course of this movie. But I will say, I think they go deep enough into the little girl's character for us to actually care about her relationship with David Harbour, Santa, and all these other characters, so it's actually impactful. It's not just a surface level, them trying to be deep type of thing. At the end of the day, I loved Violet Night. I'm going to be rewatching this one when it comes out in theaters on December 2nd because the violence and Christmas time vibes are exactly what I need. Again, the best way to describe this movie is John Wick meets Home Alone, and that is absolutely perfect for me. It's also the funniest movie of the year. The acting is great all around the board, and I do think this one will end up being a Christmas classic movie for me. Overall, I'm going to give Violet Night an 8 out of 10. If you've seen or want to check out Violet Night, let me know what you think of it in the comments down below. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.